Anybody got any burning questions that they wanted to talk about or that the course has triggered so far? You're going to be silent at first.
Hi, Emma. I would love to just have a chat.
Yeah.
It's not really a chat. I'm trying to understand how the course is being sent
Oh,
out. So I see that you've sent a couple of emails. Is the course going to be in written format throughout, or will you be providing videos? And then when I go into the membership, I see that there's a lot of stuff, and I'm just unsure what we're supposed to be doing.
okay. Yeah, fair enough. And I've been getting that question a lot because I've used a different platform this time as well. So I'm getting used to it as well. I'm sorry for the course, but so the way that it works is it's drip fed information. So I don't want to be overloading. Yeah, absolutely. Use the chat as well if you want to in the corner. So each day is a little bit of information. The first week is more like a broad kind of spectrum theories a lot. And it's written. I've recorded this morning a big like it ended up being about half an hour video on this week's content as well. So I'll explore it a little bit more. There'll be these Zoom calls. And I'm receiving some feedback from people as well. So I'm going to try, it might even be after the course that I'll have time to do it, but adding in some picture slides and, kind of make it a little bit more visual as well for people. So it won't be stagnant. But yeah, so it's drip fed information each day. And so you'll get an email with the content of that day. So that you don't have to log in each day. So there's no more coursework. I don't put in quizzes or things like that. So my hope is that a lot of you take away the concepts and you think about it to apply it. So some of them this week in particular seem really simple, I guess. And a lot of the time when you hear this stuff, it's common sense. But then when you're in a session with somebody, it's actually quite different because you can miss those simple things really, really easily. And it's handy just to kind of have those key things to come back to. So really, when we're looking at the crux of trauma, do you mind if I kind of swerve and all that kind of stuff? Again, just chuck up your hand or talk if you want to as well. But when we're talking about trauma, there's really these 3 layers. So I've got my handy little notebook here. So anytime there's trauma, we feel alone, right? That's kind of the reason we have trauma is because in that moment we've felt alone. And more importantly, we've felt alone with pain and hurt. Yeah. So what do we do with that? So there's there's a couple of reactions from that. So something painful has happened in life. I've been hurt. I've felt alone with it. Has somebody reached out, connected to me, explained it, helped me understand it? That's one way. And then that's our way to safety. But if we felt alone with pain and hurt and it hasn't been expressed, we felt like we haven't been able to talk about it or connect, then what the brain will actually do is it'll feel alone. And in order to process it or contain it, because when you feel that pain and that hurt, it's painful, it hurts in your body. So we need to know what to do with it. So particularly as a small child, what we will do is we will make it our fault. Because if it's our fault, if it's something to do with us, then we have some element of reason why it happened. And therefore we can control it. And from that space, that's where every belief that we have kind of gets formed from that space. Sorry, who said something?
I was just going to say, so from my experience with trauma, with my birth trauma, there was a physical element, being in the surgery and having the physical thing happening, which I felt, which is where you have the flashbacks and things like that from the physical aspect. And then there was the trauma of blaming myself, and that was more significant than the physical trauma in a way. I was able to move through the physical stuff within months, and the other stuff, it took years. And my understanding of trauma, from my experience of that, when I reflected over the years, I realized I'd tortured myself and I was the one hurting myself. And then so with my third birth, I decided I wouldn't do that regardless of what happened. I'm doing the best I can do. And that's what I teach my clients in this space. But when it comes to feeling alone and isolated, I've talked about my childhood a lot. So for with like growing up in DV and things like that. And for me, I don't know if if it's trauma that I'm hanging on to, or what still kind of hangs there, or if it's anger for the people not taking responsibility. Is that is that like some sort of trauma bond, or what is that about? Is that trauma?
Which part?
So you can't change what happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about what happened. When you think about the experiences, if you really think about the experiences and how you felt, that can make you feel like you're in that space, of course. I think that you're supposed to have those memories to keep you safe. I don't think you can ever get rid of them, and I don't think you should. I think you can get rid of them to a point, but they should always be there as retained memory, that maybe gets passed down to future generations so we can keep our next baby safe. But I guess I don't really know what the question is, Emma. I just
No,
it's
it's good.
interesting.
Yeah, because okay, so what happens is that you experience something dangerous and scary and painful. Yeah. And if you don't know what to do with it, it actually stays within your body. You have that reaction. And like you said, it's there to stop you from going into situations again. Where it becomes complex is that we end up in a space where we're safe and we don't need those defense mechanisms anymore. So that's when they start causing problems to health, wealth, or relationships. There's always those one of those three things. People will come to you with a health problem, a wealth problem, or a relationship problem. And what those things are is they're a coping mechanism that is no longer needed. So your body's always trying to return to homeostasis as a soul, as a spirit, as a person. You're always trying to come back to a sense of homeostasis. Whether you actually let yourself come back to the homeostasis point or not is the problem. Yeah. So when you don't, then symptoms will pop up. And you don't because defense is safer than safety. Does that make sense? Because safety means that you have to go through what you've protected yourself against. So you'll always have the memory, but hopefully you don't have the physical and emotional reaction to that memory. And it won't pop out in emotional times and reactionary times. You won't have to, I call it like a whack-a-mole problem, like you will perhaps, fix a relationship on the outside, but then your reaction to things will happen in a different way. you'll just become a more controlled person rather than a free person if you don't deal with trauma. So when we talk about dealing with trauma, what I'm actually really talking about is releasing the tension internally. So when you close your eyes, everyone close their eyes right now for a second. And I want you to breathe in as much as you can through your nose. And then I want you to breathe out through your nose. And I want you to become really aware of how easy or not that out breath is, or the exhale is. So did anyone have a purely free, long exhale? Amanda, you did? You've done the work. Anybody else? Yeah. Okay, hands up who did not. That's trauma. Your body's still holding on to tension. It's still holding on to pain somewhere. Emotions. So when we release trauma, we're not, you know, when you study psychology talks about going through the memory and having comprehension of it and everything else. But what I found really frustrating in my psychology course is that they never went deeper than that. They never actually looked at, you know, why was it sticking to begin with? And it's sticking because you haven't released the emotion of it. You haven't allowed that vulnerability to open, that so when you encounter something dangerous, technically, so this is what should happen, is that you have that vulnerable moment, and then you can go to somewhere safe, to people safe, and they provide a different perspective, and they say, you are safe now, we've got you protected, you're safe, and you're held in order to let go. So coming from more like a spiritual perspective, when I started working with trauma deeply in clinic, I would get every now and again, I'd get a vision of what I call the singing grandmothers. So it would be, I can see some of you smiling who, like, obviously, and that's the really cool thing about working on this level, is that it's like, oh, like everything that I say and do, there's going to be a part of you that's like, yeah, that makes sense, because it's already intuitively within us. We want to heal as humans, you know, we are guided to heal. So the singing grandmothers are this group of women that I would instantly see around the person, and they would sing, you know, and it's just that it was just healing, and there was nothing done. There was nothing to, you know, big process to go through. And, you know, if you're looking for a really big process, I might let you down there, because none of my stuff are big processes. It's all really just letting the person naturally do what they will naturally do, which is heal. You know, we all want to heal. Hey, Paula, I'm just going to put you on mute. And so, you know, a lot of what you're probably doing in clinic already is what's guided. And hopefully I can just confirm a lot of that for you as well, and maybe give you a little bit of context around it. Yes, and Julie, yes, I will cover anger. Anger is like a whole section next week, because anger is really important. And just like a little note, when I do anger in clinic, there's no big release, yell, scream, anything like that. Anger is literally no. The moment that you can say no, that's anger expressed. So it doesn't need to be, well, a lot of, so no matter what you're doing in your clinic, you can still talk about these concepts with people and still be aware that, particularly in birth, Ash, like people are going to have that moment where they fear being alone and fear falling into that vulnerable space, and you need to, giving birth. So that'll be that moment that, hopefully we can give you some context of what exactly is going on there and then how to work it. So we've got this, I'm alone with pain and hurt. No one's given me context of what to do with this, right? So therefore I've made it my fault. And the only way I know how to keep myself safe now is to isolate myself and pull back and hold more tension. And then we work, our brain works really well to protect us there by forming all these beliefs around that. So I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, it's my fault. And then it has all these behaviors that then stem to that. So quite often as therapists, we can kind of get caught up in the belief systems and trying to, convince people that they are good enough and all that kind of stuff. Whereas that's a natural state, is to feel I'm good enough and I am lovable. It's something that's gotten in the way of that. So when we can find the crux of it, then it all begins to just unwind itself. Any questions so far? Any comments? No. So again, I'd like to make things really, really simple. So humans have a fear of being alone, and we will do anything to avoid being alone or to control the feeling of being alone. So for instance, the client I just got off the phone with just now, she broke up with someone, fell in love, it felt like a soulmate. She ended up playing out in this relationship a constant pulling, pushing away. I want you, I don't want you. She finally kicked him out, realized she's made a massive mistake because she loves him, and realized that she was playing out childhood trauma, which she'd never really dealt with before. She'd never thought about before. So her trauma was, on the storyline, it was dad and mum had her young, separated. Dad never really showed up. Mum was emotional. So you're trying to help her understand that from a cognitive point of view first. Understand that what exactly was going on in her parents' life, because it's not just her experience anymore. So the trauma, the first memory that she came up with was sitting on her front step alone, waiting for her dad to show up. And she would have been about 5 years old on Christmas Day, and he never showed up. So that was kind of, to use her an example, that's that perfect example of feeling alone with pain. It's just like, you can imagine that as a little girl, and if you can feel it in your body, imagine being that little girl who feels that alone and that amount of pain with a mother who is unable to connect at all emotionally or even see that she's going through that. So she's felt so alone and in the pain. So what I did with her was I asked her to remember what it was like as a little girl. So see yourself on that day. What does the stoop look like? What does it look like? What does it feel like? And then what is that little girl saying? And what she was saying was, where is he? What's happening? And I asked her to then feel that in her body. Whereabouts in your body is that pain being held? And she could pinpoint that really easily in her heart. And it is in that moment she started to get emotional. So what you're doing is you're providing that space where she's no longer alone with that pain. She's getting to express it, and she's beginning to be held through it. So this is where the healing begins. And so she in that moment, so once you start feeling the pain of it, as an adult, the only way to really find connection again is to step her into the adult rather than the child. So as a child, she was powerless. Yeah. So you want to show her nervous system that she now has power and she's now safe. The other important thing here is if you leave her in the child's going to look for an adult. And that adult in the situation is you. And you don't want her you don't want yourself to be that person for her, because you can't be. You're not in her, what I call, real life. Does that make sense? So what I did was I asked her then to see her adult self next to the little girl on the stoop. So all of a sudden now she's seeing both, but she's the adult in the situation. So when you're working through quite severe abuse and assault, and think this is a really, really important step, because you're stepping out of what you experienced and seeing it outside in. Does that make sense? So now the questions come at, what does the little girl want to say to you? And so now that little girl inside has someone to connect to, which she didn't back then. Yeah, so now she's no longer alone. And she's being heard and she's being held. And she's just, that little girl, so I'm not putting any words in her mouth. She's just saying what she's feeling here. So the little girl was feeling pain, hurt, just why wasn't he here? Why wasn't he here? So you're just asking gently, what does the little girl do next? What do you do next? So you becoming from that really curious space of, I want to know what's happening. I want to know what happens next. So you're kind of on that journey with her. And so the little girl goes inside and goes to her bedroom. And so I get my client to walk in to the bedroom and sit with her on the bed. And, it was just like, it was the perfect session to have just before I jumped on this call, because it was like this in a nutshell. And I said, what do you want to say to the little girl? And she said what popped out was, there's nothing wrong with you. Yeah. So all these years, what is she? So 40 years, she had spent feeling like that had happened because there was nothing wrong, because there was something wrong with her. So that was a secret, right? That she was holding, was that he didn't turn up because it was my fault, because it was who I was. She was also holding in the secret that she was hurting that bad because there was no one there to hear it. So, when she said there's nothing wrong with you, I asked her what the little girl's response was. And the little girl said, really? Again, there's that confirmation that she had been holding on to that. So then you can work from that, and what do you want to give what do you feel like the little girl needs? And quite often they'll say something. If they've rejected that little girl for so long, or that little person for so long, they'll say something. But what you actually want is physical contact, because that's that nurture that they never got. So it won't be their initial thought if there hasn't been physical contact a lot in their childhood. It won't be their initial thought, but you can say to her, I said to her, well, how about a hug or a cuddle? And then that's when the dam breaks, most often, is because that's that healing, that's that comfort that they really wanted. But the beautiful thing is it comes from them. It doesn't come from you, it doesn't come from spirit or anybody else outside of themselves. It comes from within them. So they're held and heard, not just by you in that moment, they're heard and held by themselves. which is then how we then, create that life from that point is, okay, now I'm parenting myself from here on in. So what I give her afterwards is, keep that little girl with you every day and just chat with her. So that's the easiest way to show yourself love, is to show that little person inside love. It's much easier than trying to convince yourself that you're lovable through affirmations and everything else. And now all of a sudden you've healed the pain and hurt, the shame, and the feeling of alone. And you've heard the tension within your body. So within 15 minutes, you've unraveled a core trauma within someone's life. And it's really, really simple. And you're just doing that over and over and over again. So that's pretty much the course. So we'll see you later. But you can, there's so many, and now from that point on, now it becomes about teaching her how to live from that space, and then dealing with the conflicts and the changes in her relationships, wealth and health that come from now, that awareness now. Because her body, now that you've opened up that chest and you've, that secret that she's kept, you've demystified it, you've heard it, there's no reason to hold it anymore. So the body's going to want to come back to homeostasis. It's going to want safety now. It's going to want to unravel everything. So things will become uncomfortable now.
Emma, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
Going a step back from that, when people know they've had trauma, we've got that to work with. But as we know, people can dissociate. It can be happening so young that there's body memory, but not explicit memory. But you have people come into your work and you can suspect pretty strongly they're suffering from the effects of trauma, but they're not aware of that themselves. Do you just start with, I guess the question is, where would you start? I would tend to start with just getting them in touch with their body and doing things about if they're feeling anxious or tense, where they feel it, what it looks like, and then see if things come from that, if there's anything connected to that. Is that how you would do it, or can you expand on how you would work with someone who doesn't know but you think that could be the issue, if that question makes sense?
No, it does completely. Yeah, because quite often you'll think straight away, okay, this is trauma based. Obviously, it depends on how anxious and how much work that person has done before. So if they've tried to touch on a lot of different therapies and things, and where they've come from. So for instance, I've had people in who've never been to anybody before. They've never spoken to anybody before. And so in those people, I would do lots of body work first, and that was one client in particular, who, it was 6 months in that I heard about her rape. And then it was 3 years later that I heard about her childhood abuse. Yeah. So it was like, it took that long for her to open up to things. So in that case, we do heaps and heaps of body work and just heaps of really, really gentle. It's like exactly the same thing over session, over session, over session. You're not really digging deeper. You're just trying to get her to feel what safety feels like. What does safety feel like? And there's huge power in that too. Don't underestimate that. This is what safety feels like. So I have a big weighted blanket and I curl them up and we talk and, and then there's people and that they've been dancing for a while, so they're the ones I'll come straight out and I'll say, okay, so what's the trauma? It can be that simple. You're like, all your signs and symptoms, textbook trauma. So where's the trauma? What's the trauma? And particularly if you know that there's someone who likes to come in with a lot of defense mechanisms, that can be just a really nice way of opening things up. And you'll have your own wording around things. Other people need a lot of explaining and theory first, to kind of then put it into context and feel safe to open up. other people will bring their kids in for years before they come in and see you and finally say, "Ah, okay." Yeah. Yeah, you know, hopefully within this course you'll become so familiar with that journey. It's also your ability, your comfortability in, so if I say to someone, what's your trauma? I need to be prepared for their next reaction. And I need to be, you know, part of that is what we call like building your database. You know, you just kind of become, you know, I've heard thousands of stories, so I kind of know how people are going to, like, I have that intuition now of how people are going to react. But when you're working from that new space, you know, you have to be prepared that they might get angry first, or they might, you know, react first. And so you have to be in a space where you're not coming from a trauma response, you know, where you're able to take that anger and say, okay, that's okay. I'm okay with you being angry at me with me, but here I'm going to lead you still, and, you know, be able to hold that space for that. It's also a lot in your tone of voice. You have to be really, really prepared to watch your tone of voice. Because it's not really what you say, it's how you say it. So if I came in with that little bit of judgment, so what's your trauma? You know, as opposed to, okay, so what's your trauma? What's going on? Where did it come from? That leaves an open space with your voice. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay. What other questions do we have or comments? Hey,
Can I
Fee.
ask a question? Oh, sorry.
No, hello.
Was someone else going to go?
No, we can go around. That's fine. Hey, Steph.
Oh, how are you guys? Emma, this is so good because it's so funny. I actually had a call from a new client for their child, and when we were talking over the phone, we were just going through what's happening for her 4-year-old, and he's gone through some trauma in the last 15 months. And there's a lot of stuff happening. So a lot of sleep stuff, a lot of stuff at daycare. And anyway, we were just talking about it. And it was really interesting because I said over the phone, I'm like, how are you doing, Mama? And she just broke down. And we're on the phone for about an hour. And yeah, I just spoke to her about, you know, it's a really good chance because she's bringing him in next weekend. And I said, it's a really great chance for you to come in and we can chat and get to know each other. And it might be a great idea for me to work with your son, but also check your nervous system, see how you're feeling and all of that kind of stuff. And she goes, oh, I just don't know where to start. Like, there's so much here. I just feel like I'm walking trauma. So it was just really interesting from that one little comment, just saying, how are you doing, Mama? It just opened up. So I've kind of let her know what might be happening next weekend. But how do you go about, I think the question is, how do you go about suggesting that maybe the parents come in? Because I've got so many clients like that where you're working with the kid and, you know, you're seeing them every 2 to 3 weeks and they're doing really well, but you're noticing there's some stuff going on with the parents that they might need that extra bit of support. So how do you go about doing that?
Part of it is like those little moments where you're on the phone with them.
Yeah.
Not letting that be a session.
Yes.
Because that's a really safe place to offload without actually having that pressure of doing any of the work. Does that make sense? That's a bit of a tension.
Total sense.
Valve release there. So you think you're doing really good, you know, like she needs you in that moment, but really it's you know, when like an alcoholic, you know, you first listen to an alcoholic in that alcoholic stage. You might not, I'm saying, you know, so I guess you can pick up some of my background there, but you know, they'll say the story and you're listening and you want to heal them, and then there comes to a point where you realize that they're not processing anything that you're saying, just dumping in, that it'll just all fill up to exactly the same point again the next moment.
Yeah.
So part of that is, you know, in that moment, just going, look, there's, I want to say here as well, like, there are the things that you're meant to say,
Mm-hmm.
and there are the things that you need to say.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? As a therapist, you know, you were taught so much of what to say, and this is why I'm always hesitant to give you too much. It's because you're taught what to say, but that can actually disconnect you as a practitioner, because you're thinking about the process rather than the person.
Yeah.
So you have to be aware of what to say without, you know, following that really strict guideline. But, you know, what probably would come out naturally in that point is, look, you know, so much of what our children feel comes from our reactions at home, you know, and we have to be aware, you know, so you give context in that space. So because she's gone through so much trauma, you have to kind of give her a framework of what's happening and help her understand and see it. And so I would say something along the lines of, you know, like, he's watching your reactions to things, he's noticing how you're feeling all of the time, and he needs to feel safe and held, and you're holding him, but because you've been through so much, you know, again, you know, not, you know, you've been through, you're not playing, you have to be aware. Again, this is where all that awareness comes from, because you know that she's been through so much trauma, so she's holding so much shame. Yeah, this is where, like, okay, you might read what I'm saying, go, yeah, you know, it's just shame, you know, okay, she's talking about shame. But when you really truly can comprehend that she's standing there and she's talking, but you have to be aware that, okay, she's been through so much trauma that she's got mountain loads of shame. So you could trigger that at any point and lose her child as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, you sorry, I'll answer some questions in a second, but yeah, so, you know, what you've been through is a lot, and let me work with both of you, you know.
Yeah.
That's what I would say in that moment. Let me work with both of you.
Yeah, that's good, because it definitely did.
Yeah.
It definitely did get, I didn't realize how it was going to open up that question.
Yeah.
And then I was trying to rein it in. And I think because I don't usually get called in, like, usually people just book online and it's all good. But this was a different scenario for me. And I was trying to rein it in, and I just, yeah, it was really tricky.
Yeah. So
the fact that you were talking about it.
It's a tricky question to ask on the phone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that for next time.
Yeah,
so that was actually
that's a
really good you
question for
bringing
phone.
that up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Emma. Thank you.
That's okay. Fee, hello. You had a question?
Well, I was actually more going to comment, and it's interesting that I can't remember. Oh, Stephanie, what you just brought up, I thought that was interesting, because sometimes when I've had situations like that with parents and children, you just weave it in. I'll just weave it in and say sometimes children are very connected to us, and when things aren't resolving like we should, sometimes it's easier to treat the parent because you're so connected, and then we can also treat the children and they get a better resolution or better, you know, result, or things resolve, or their pain goes away, or whatever it is for that child. And that's how I often will say and introduce it. But the thing that I was going to say at the start is connected to this as well. It's also about being patient for me. Like, and I'll internally have this voice to say, is this the right time to ask this? And I always listen to that. Well, actually, sometimes I don't listen, and then but most of the time I listen and say, and if there's a no, I go, okay, not the right time. And I've got a particular patient at the moment. I know she's had a severe amount of trauma. I can just tell. But when I ask her about things, she just says, oh, I just had a terrible, divorce. But I'm like 99% certain that there was, physical abuse in there just because how she feels. But she's not ready to talk about it. She's not ready to address it. And when she is, a lot of her, you know, symptoms will go away, but it's going to be a big, messy,
Yeah.
you know, well. So it's the patience. That's what I was going to say originally.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's that secretness. You know, we have to honor the secretness, because there's been a reason why it's been kept secret. And particularly in the case of trust, you know.
Yeah, and safety.
They're gonna, need to formulate a lot of trust with us before we can push them. Thank you. Hey, Paula.
Hi. Just kind of on that, it's also a question. Do you find that people present with what they're ready to deal with just then?
Never.
Just whatever comes up, comes up?
Yeah. No, it's never what they've come in for. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But like what their nervous system is saying, okay, this is the first thing, we're going to start here. And then like it's not like a conscious thing, like it's a subconscious.
Yeah. Again, it depends on how much work they've done. Because if they've done a lot of work on that one thing and it's still not resolving, then you want to go deeper. But if it's the first time that they've come in to see someone, I mean, you know, you still need to address what they've come in for sure.
Okay.
But yeah, no, you can, it depends on where on their journey, they are really, and how open they are. And
also just on what Stephanie and Fiona were talking about, I did an accidental experiment earlier this year. So I've been working really hard, just staying clear and staying clean, and keeping my just keeping my energy mine, and letting other people's yucky stuff sort of sit outside and not, whereas I usually was kind of wishy-washy and would go into people's problems and all that. So I've just been practicing that, and then I'm getting all these insights, and then there's people like family members just coming out with words, which are the thoughts that I had the day or the week or a couple of days before. And so then the whole house, everybody, or 5 people in my house, they're all happier, and they've stayed happier, and it just sort of keeps evolving like that. And it's kind of, well, maybe it is like, treat the parents, treat the mum.
Yeah,
because
for sure. Yeah, well, they often say that the mum is the emotional barometer of the house, unfortunately, you know, but the quicker we kind of get aware of that, the quicker we can move through things.
It's kind of was fun, like it's much faster than me talking to people about their problems and helping them. I just like, it's not got anything to do with me. We're just in the same psychic soup or something. Yeah, and you know, that's why a lot of, so answering some of the body work, we're going to go through week 3, that's all the body work stuff, so I won't go into that now, but a lot of it's just nurturing, you know, really simply just nurturing. And if you can come from that energy, then the rest will flow. You know, you'll intuitively know where to put your hand and what to do, because I mean, the reason that we're all here is because we all want to nurture people, and so we all have that instinct within us on how to do that. So trust that is what I'm saying, and let it lead you as well, because again, you know, you can do all the techniques, but if you're not in a nurturing space, it's not really gonna hit the spot, if that makes sense. Yeah. Any other questions or comments?
Hi Emma, it's Kim. How you going?
Good. Where are you? Where are you? Can you put your hand up for me? Oh, there you are. Hello. Sorry. Hello.
Hello. I just had a question. I have a client who I seen years ago, and she's actually come back after a couple of years, and she's had a lot of trauma in her life, and so have her children. And I can see the pattern there, but she's still very much in, I guess, that blame stage and not wanting to take responsibility or see the part that she's played in that. What do you do in that situation?
I'll often get them to put themselves in the other person's shoes. So how would you you know, I start with my signature, close your eyes and take a deep breath. And then, you know, I want you to imagine that you've got somebody there that loves you, that is saying this to you. And you say exactly the words that they've just used. And when you say, you know, what's your reaction? What do you feel? And then that's quite a nice way of opening up. Oh, like, actually, that's how I would feel. Yeah. So, you know, where does that come from? Why do you feel like you need to make people feel that way? You know, and you can trigger them a little bit there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes when we're in a session, it's like it's such a deep feeling for me that I can just tell that she's not, you know, there's so much shame there that she can't get to that next stage.
So
and a lot of it doesn't feel true.
Yeah. There's a moment, and if you've been, you know, it's often a couple of sessions in, so you've been working around the same thing a little bit, and you've done the compassionate thing. You have to do the compassionate thing first, by the way, a couple of times. And then I do the crack and hold, what I call it. So you trigger them intentionally.
Yeah.
So in that case, you know, if they're blaming other people, I would say something a bit triggering along the lines of like, why do you treat people like that? Or what makes you, you know, what makes you hold that energy towards that people? You know, like kind of something a little bit harsher.
Yeah, okay.
Are you calling them out on their actions?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but you have to follow it up with an understanding of why they're doing that. So you put it into context.
Mm-hmm.
So you say, okay, you know, why would, you know, you're hurting people when you do that to them. Did you know that? You know, but as humans, we often just want to blame because ultimately we're trying to push away the spotlight on ourselves. So what's actually going on there? Can we explore that a little bit more? So you're making them accountable, but then you're holding that non-judgmental space underneath it. So you're following it up pretty quickly with the hold underneath it.
Yeah.
Don't leave them in a silent space too much after just attacking them. You know, it's got to follow it up with the context.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's okay. Did anybody else have any other questions? I'll follow that. So I had it. Oh yeah. Hey, Mandy.
Hey, hi. Just a quickie. I got my notes out to start today, just to comment. The last bit, I think this was from your last course, and it said on here, oh, I can't see it now. That's from today. This is my job. It's not me. And that was very, very, very helpful for me last night, because then the client texted me about something and it was sort of a bit triggering. And then I just went, all right, yeah, no, this is actually my job. This isn't me. And so I just thought I wanted to just comment on that. Yeah. And that was really, really helpful. So thanks for that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's handy for yourself as well, to be able to show up. It's particularly when when you become triggered. And I think we have to be careful if we're working with trauma because we are trying to heal our own trauma. You know, there's a lot of projection that can come from that space. So you just have to be really, really aware of yourself if you're coming from that space. You also want to ask yourself, why do I keep triggering my own trauma every single day? You know, you can teach the essence of what you've gone through without having to expose yourself to that trauma day in, day out, because that can be really, a lot. Depending on where you are on your journey, of course, if you've completely emptied all those secrets out and you are completely not alone anymore, then it can be really healing. But if you've got those triggers, then there's going to be a moment where, and I can say this because I've treated so many therapists as well, there's going to be a moment where your tension becomes anger with that client or frustration. And that's when you know you've been triggered. Well, what was I going to say? I was going to talk about with Kim's comment on blame. So one of my first little client today, I've been seeing her since she was 13. She's now in her 20s, early 20s. And she, she's got this beautiful partner, and she calls me up and she says, I think he's a narcissist. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. Tell me more, because everyone's a narcissist or borderline personality or ADHD these days. So ADHD is trauma, by the way, guys. It's, it's coping mechanisms. That's my opinion. Happy to hear otherwise, but, it's just, you get these moments where they're all researching new drugs and stuff. So then you get a lot of diagnoses in those areas all of a sudden pop up. But, okay, why is he a narcissist, darling? He doesn't want to hear me. She's throwing out the younger generation. I'm showing my age here. The younger generations have a lot of labels for things nowadays. He's gaslighting me. He's this and that. So okay. What's actually really going on, Dal? So she's blaming him for all these patterns. And okay, so you can kind of see that. You can kind of see that she's blaming, and I've got two options in that moment, and I can start going into all of the stories with her about what's going on in her relationship. But because I've seen her for 10 years nearly, I'm going to go straight to the trauma. I know what her trauma is, and I can see the picture really clearly at that point. And because I've established a relationship with her for 10 years where she trusts me explicitly, and I know her so well, we've got that relationship where I can dive straight in. But it's a really good framework for you to kind of see where, so much of that blame game on other people is actually just a way to protect their own behavior. So her behavior was that she had isolated herself in the relationship, and he'd become her only source of comfort, only source of socialization, comfort, love, everything, because she had disconnected from her girlfriends and her friends for so long. So it was just that point where, so the way I described it to her was that, when she first fell into, when they first met, they trauma bonded in a lot of ways. They gave each other safety. That's not a bad thing, right? It's not, because it's natural, it's human. We all connect with pain first. Like, oh, you have the same pain as I do. Teenagers will do it when they first come into individuation, and we'll talk about that. Sorry, watching the time. They will find a tribe that has the same pain as them. Not a problem in itself, as long as we grow from that. So there will come a point where that what felt safe, now we feel safe enough that now it's become uncomfortable, because we want to grow. We always want to grow. We always want to expand. And her background is that her dad, I've had a couple of those today. Her dad disappeared. It's funny how you get like a bunch of them together. Her dad disappeared, and her mum's never really found a nice relationship, right? So not lots of bad ones, just quite controlled in not dating anybody or having one really bad relationship. And so she's never really trusted people before. So she now has gotten to a stage where, rather than feeling safe and expanding past that relationship, she's re-triggering abandonment wounds in order to prove control. So she's trying to get him to abandon her and trying to prove to herself that he is abandoning her, which is where the label narcissism comes, And the way that when we're talking about narcissism, because it's a so overused word, what I will say to the client is it intentional or emotional? Because if their partner's reaction and that narcissist reaction is emotional, it's not real narcissism. It's just emotional defense. If it's intentional, if I'm intentionally manipulating you, that's narcissism. Narcissistic behavior comes from an emotional defense and trauma. So the inability to it's a narcissistic person will come from a conditionally loved environment. So you want to be asking, what's their relationship with their mother like? How would their mother respond when he made her upset? That kind of thing. So a lot of the time they're men who have been the cause of their mother's pain, so to speak. So they don't feel safe, open, so they control the emotional environment around them, and they try and prove that they're distant. And they try and, they're angry at their mother, so therefore they're angry at their partner. Too angry. But it comes from an emotional space, not a manipulative space. So what they've come in with, that's where I was going with this. I'm like, where did I go on that one? Blame. And what they came in with is that, he's a narcissist, I'm blaming him. Well, actually, it's because you're not following your own safety out, which is to connect to other people outside of you. But if I didn't really know her, then I would have to try and find out, okay, what is her secret? And her secret is that it hurt when Dad left me. Because you convince yourself that it doesn't hurt. How's everyone sitting with all of that? Yeah.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Because when I write it in those little things, you can read it and go, oh, there's not a lot of information in. But then like when you really think about it and you can really process it, that's why I hold the Zooms and I'll send some videos through. So you can kind of hear it from a different perspective. But
I think for me with the writing, it's hard for me to integrate it because it doesn't have the stories.
Okay.
And I learn through storytelling. I realize, like, I read books all the time, so I can, learn things from reading. But
yeah,
as my learning, it's definitely storytelling, connecting to that. So I'll remember those stories, but I won't remember the words or something. You know what I mean? I'll remember some of the stories, and everyone's different. There's so many learning different styles.
So if I could give you like, perhaps just wait until the videos come out each week and then go back and read the information, because it might give it a little bit more context.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you don't have
and these videos are really good too, to hear, for everyone to ask their questions and be able to understand it as well. And that narcissism thing was so interesting too, because my dad, I've called him a narcissist a lot, but I know he's not, because I know he has feelings and love for people. So you putting it into context, it's probably more behavior driven, which is what I've thought. You can't be a narcissist because you do have emotions. Everything you do is emotion based, but you do a lot of narcissist behavior where there's that manipulative stuff. I always put it into my family context for me to understand and then process it that way. Really interesting.
Oh, good. Yeah. And yeah, that's why I love these Zooms, because I do. And, I get to talk about how I'm treating case studies and stuff like that. So yeah. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Emma.
My pleasure. So I'll put out the recording. I just had a mini freak out. I was like, oh, did I record? But no, I did. Yeah, so I'll put out the recording over the next couple of days.
Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma.
Bye, guys.